Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Got a story here that could send a chill up your spine. Scott sent it. It's from Newsweek. Small town seeking a 225% property tax increase. Now, property taxes can be large, and they always get larger, but 225% in one jump. Julia Carbonaro wrote this. Homeowners in the small town of Wellington, Utah, could soon be facing much larger property tax bills as city authorities seek a more than 225% increase after years of not making increases. And it is better to have the small increases rather than nothing and like this, like Roger Ramjet. A looming decision on the property tax hike was postponed on Wednesday by the Wellington City Council after a long public hearing on the same day revealed the depth of residents' concerns over the potential financial burden they could be shouldering from a big hike. It's a burden that has gotten heavier for millions of Americans across the country in recent years as these bills have risen in step with home values following the pandemic home buying frenzy. Nationwide, according to Redfin, property taxes rose by nearly 30% between 2019 and 2024, reaching a monthly median of $250. Under the proposal made by Wellington authorities, the property tax on a $250,000 residence would increase from $216 to $704, which would be up $487 per year, which is more than double. The tax on a $256,000 business would increase from $393 to $1,280, again, more than double. During the public hearing on Wednesday, the mayor told a room packed with residents, this is a pretty harsh thing to swallow. The revenues generated by higher property taxes, he said, will be used for public safety, road repairs, utilities, and other operations essential to keep the city running. So Newsweek reached out to the mayor's office via email. The tax hike, if implemented, would bring the city's revenues up to $1.6 million, which would still leave a gap of $26,000 when compared to their total expenses, which amount to $1.6 according to the city. So it's 1.646 versus 1.673. I hate math in the morning. Without the tax hike, the city would face a shortfall of $400,000. This is about preserving the city we have and preserving the future. And so if there is this shortfall, you wonder how that would have worked if they'd simply been increasing the taxes a tiny little bit each year over the years. The 225% property tax hike requested by Wellington authorities was the highest sought in the entire state of Utah for 2026, according to data shared by the Utah Taxpayers Association, which is a group calling for lower taxes and sound tax policies in the state. Wellington is a victim of its previous elected officials not being willing to make the hard decisions, a spokesperson for that group said. While the mayor explained in his comments that those before him could have done more to prevent the drastic increase, he's now left having to figure out how to get the city in a good spot, financially speaking. But Wellington was not the only small town in the state that pursued double-digit increases. One city's doing a property tax increase of 100%. Gunnison, 78%. Eureka, 72%. Howell City, 65%, and so on. During the meeting on Wednesday, Wellington residents expressed their concerns over such a massive increase being done so suddenly. One resident said, I'm heartbroken because I thought this would be a forever house. But the reality is these taxes are going to be more than my mortgage. I can't afford to live here. City authorities say the proposed hike is so high because Wellington has not increased property taxes since 2017. But residents think that the officials should not try to make up for lost time in one large hike. I'm imploring you guys to make some of those overdue needs overdue some more, one guy said. According to the Utah Taxpayers Association, the state system is set up such that elected officials cannot ignore property taxes. They need to make hard decisions and work hard with their constituents to educate them and inform them as to why an increase is needed. So they're going to make a final vote on this and final decision in October. But there is something about politics and how politicians operate. And sometimes they do what they refer to as kicking the can down the road. That is, we won't deal with the problem now. Someone will deal with it later. And you understand that, like, if an election is coming up, just I'm picking something at random here. Let's suppose you have a hard decision to make but an election is coming up. Well, let's make the decision after the election because the decision might upset some people. So the election happens and a bunch of people in office get voted out for whatever reason, or they get term limited out. So now a bunch of new people come in and they inherit the problems of the last administration. And that happens all the time. And no one wants to raise taxes. They know it's unpopular to do that. But there comes a time where they may have to. And by not raising them for 8 years, they've got a shortfall now. And if they had simply raised it incrementally along the way, might not have this shortfall. And people might have gotten used to what was happening. And by the way, the person who says, I can't afford my house now, if they had raised it to the same thing they're raising it to now, but over time, they might still have that problem. They might. But at least it wouldn't be a shock to the system. And that's the real issue. Because if somebody is budgeted really, really well, they got all their bills figured out, they got their income. Let's suppose they're on a fixed income. They're on a fixed income, but they know what their burn rate is on their money because they got all these bills. Yeah, I got this taken care of. And suddenly somebody comes by and goes, oh, you know that property tax bill? Multiply that by 225%. It's going to be up by 225%. Increase it by 225. What? That can do what they refer to as, that can blow the budget. Big time. Now what do? And so it's a problem. And they clearly handled it wrong. But the thing about it is, I'm willing to bet you that if you go back to 2017 when the first decision was made to not raise taxes, I'm betting a bunch of these city council members were doing something else that time. And a different city council said, no one wants to raise rates. Let's just not do that yet. So I've had people ask me about local taxes, city taxes or township or wherever it is that you live that charges you taxes. And there's a whole thing there too. Because they just kind of go, here's what we think you owe us. And I've known people who have fought the assessments, and some have won, some have lost. But it's not something I handle. But I know that that's another area of much frustration. Because somebody comes by and says, here's what we think your house is worth. What are you basing that on? Especially if I've lived here 20 years. You know? And now don't get me wrong. There are places like, Redfin, they mentioned that here, and others, Zillow, where they'll say, here's what we think your house is worth. But it's estimates based on other numbers out there. And who knows? And you really don't know what your house is worth until you sell it, i.e. what someone will pay you for it. But, they base it partially based on the value of your home. Well, who knows? A lot of debate there, as they say. So we'll see what happens, but they're talking about possibly making the call in October, but they're probably going to have to raise their taxes somewhat, if not the full 225%. So that's from Newsweek. Scott, thanks for sending that. This small town is seeking a 225% property tax increase. Other towns are doing it also, but just not that big. Julia Carbonaro wrote that for Newsweek. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. I started out with nothing, and I still have most of it.